Ideas, by definition, are always fragile.
No tolerance for failure, no innovation.
The best ideas have to win.
This is the Synthesize Pod from Bright Idea. It's your weekly hit of insights and actionable strategies for innovation-minded professionals that just want to get shit done. Welcome to Season 1, Just Say Hackathon.
Okay, hey everyone, we're back for another episode of the Hackathon Synthesize podcast. And today we have Everett and Benjamin with us. You guys want to say hello and introduce yourself?
Sure. My name is Ben Wasson. I'm the Director of Business Development for SS&C Advent Professional Services.
Yeah. So Everett Hagan, basically head of product strategy and design and at SS&C.
So maybe you guys could just fill in our audience here on Advent and SSC and what that means and kind of what your day-to-day job looks like.
Yeah, if you're not in our space, you've probably never heard of us. So we're basically in the fintech market for wealth management, assets, and alternatives. And we're part of a much larger umbrella organization, SS&C. And over the last 5 years, we have been regrouping and creating a new sub-org, which we call Wealth Investment and Technology.
And so for the layman, that's you guys build the systems that the financial services companies use. So if I call up my brokerage and I have a lot more money, they pull up effectively your system and to look at what I'm doing and what's going on.
So we play at multiple levels. So I focus more on the advisory space. So let's say your personal financial advisor broke off from like Charles Schwab or one of the big brokerage and now is going it independent. And so they're using our platform to manage your portfolios, look at your financial planning. And then Ben, I'll let you take this, Ben, is on the asset and alternative side of the business.
I mean, SS&C in general, like we have a portfolio of products and services that really touch every facet of investment and asset management. Like Everett was saying, we serve many different customers, but we're kind of like the plumbing of the financial services world. So I believe we're the largest mutual fund transfer agency. We're one of the largest ETF agencies. We're one of the largest fund administrators in the world. We've got something to the tune of $40 trillion of assets managed on our platforms. And to really boil it down, if you want to be an investment manager, whether that's an RIA, a hedge fund, or just a kind of a family office, and all you want to do is manage the investments and manage your relationships, we can do literally everything else from compliance to accounting to integrations to web portals. Like we have a solution for you. We even have solutions where we'll run your call centers for you. So it's a very comprehensive suite of services and solutions for our customers. And I don't know the exact numbers, but like if you've ever gotten a 401k statement, there's probably something like a 90% chance that at some point, some of the data in that 401k statement has touched SS&C Technologies.
Got it.
That's a great stat.
And then how big is the Advent unit? How headcount and
So I think we're at the 4,000 mark.
Yeah, so somewhere about there, between 3,500 and 4,000,
yeah,
I think.
and you got people spread around the world or around the country?
Both, from Beijing, Middle East, Europe, here. So when we do run a hackathon, it's for Ben and I, it's an all-day experience.
All day, all night.
That's a recurring theme in one of our earlier episodes. The guy who was on, he basically said he was up for 2 days straight because he was getting all these issues, and it's like if you don't clear the issue, it's you're burning the time that people have to hack. So
we should talk. Ben and I had to shift and sleep in shifts every 2 hours so that we can make sure everything was working.
So I want to get to all that, but I also want to hear kind of the people story behind all this. So maybe you guys can share a little bit about how you got to financial services, how you got to product development, kind of when did you know you found your groove and this was it? And then maybe how'd you get specifically to innovation and hackathons?
So I've been in the digital innovation space for the last 20 years. So I've worked on the agency side, supporting startups to enterprise. And so generally I focus on kind of early stage discovery is where my specialty lies, and concepting new ideas. About 15 years ago now, I got married, and my wife didn't really care for the consulting side because it had me, let's say, on the go and on airports a lot. So that's when I came into the enterprise side of things. And I've been with SS&C for the last 7 years. I started off as the head of their UX department for the wealth platform. And then Ben and I saw an opportunity about 5 years ago when our executives put out kind of a challenge. And one of the pillars to that challenge was innovation. And that's when Ben and I truly got to know each other, as well as a small group of other volunteers, because that's how we started off in this journey together basically as an all volunteer group.
Got it. And the consulting work, was that in financial services, doing this product work, or was
across
it
multiple fintech, healthcare, government, and consumer goods? So
you love the regulation.
Yeah. Yes. Convincing regulators of innovation, that's the whole different podcast.
Yeah, when you mentioned alternative, I was like, oh, are we going to get into crypto here at some point? So, but one last question, then we'll jump over to Benjamin. Everett, what's your hometown? And tell us an interesting fact about your hometown.
Well, so I'm an Army brat. So I grew, originally from New York. I would probably call DC my hometown. After college, went there, worked. I got started at AOL in the very early .com days. That would be the closest to a home spot that I go back to every couple of years.
Got it. All right. And anything interesting? The thing that's most interesting to you of DC?
Oh, DC is our sport is politics. Okay, I couldn't care less about football and baseball, but.
There's way more blood, sweat, and tears in the politics.
Absolutely.
Football.
And drama.
Yep.
Yeah, for sure these days. Maybe we'll get into that as well. All right, Benjamin, tell us your story. How'd you get into this world and, financial services and, kind of the innovation space?
Financial services completely by accident, to be honest. I have always been really interested in business and starting businesses. So one of my goals when I went off to college was I'm going to learn how to build products and go and figure out how to, raise money for them. So I did a computer science degree, realized really early on that other people are way better at programming than I am. So decided to tack on an MBA. I was going to be graduating in like the early 2010, and it was not a really great time to be graduating with the financial crisis. So stuck it out and got my MBA. And while I was doing my MBA, I actually founded and got a startup funded called Order Bolt. We did mobile ordering and payments in bars and restaurants. What sucks is that still isn't really a thing anymore. Every time I go and I wait 25 minutes to get my check from a busy restaurant, I cringe inside because I was like, oh man, I did this 15 years ago and didn't do it. But my biggest regret on that one is we didn't try to patent the way we did our payment. So we were using QR codes to tell where you were at so you could do the payments, and now that's everywhere. And I wish I would have patented it because we probably wouldn't be working a day job. But so after that startup ran out of money because PCI compliance is awful and it was really, really hard back then, went and got into solutions consulting with a small SaaS company in St. Louis. Spent a couple of years doing that, and then ended up had a friend that worked here at Advent. Funny, he worked from home from St. Louis and recruited me in. And I was like, oh, great, I'm going to get this awesome work from home job. But they ended up sending me down here to Jacksonville, Florida, where I work now. We were trying to, at the time we had acquired the organization that Everett works with a couple of years before. I think we were trying to build up the Jacksonville office where Black Diamond was based. I think when I started, we had 50 or 60 people in Jacksonville in 2015, and now we've got well over 750. So we've really grown this area quite a bit. And innovation's always been something that's been interesting to me. In grad school, I did a certificate in innovation management with the Grenoble School of Business, which is a really, really good experience for me. And that's kind of got my toes dipped into sort of the more structured way to do that than what you typically see, which is like, hey, let's do a brainstorming session and throw stuff at the wall and there's actually things you got to do to manage innovation and structure that should be put around it. Especially like when you think about enterprises, like you need to actually have structure or you're going to be spinning your wheels forever. So we had a big all staff, I think it was sometime late in 2019 where we'd added innovation as one of our core pillars for the organization for culture. And, Everett and I both, independently reached out to the person who had presented that slide. I said, hey, if you're putting up a team to do this, I want to be part of it because I'm really passionate about this. I've got some background in it, and I'm really happy to see our the company doing these things because, sometimes you lose sight of what you do that's innovative, and it's good to be kind of on the front line sometimes.
Yep. And
I
how
think
many?
that's really. Oh, you're going to go into the hometown. You can
No,
just
go ahead,
edit me
Mark.
right out.
Go ahead.
No, we could do the hometown fun fact. I'll let you do it, and then I have a question.
All
And then I have
right.
a deeper
Fun fact
question.
on the hometown, then we'll go to Margaret.
So I like Everett. I moved around a lot. My dad actually worked for 3M, so we moved around with the company quite a bit. But he's super innovative company. He actually worked in not the headquarters, but got to spend some time in the headquarters up in Minneapolis, St. Paul. But we actually lived in Wisconsin, so I call Hudson, Wisconsin, my hometown. The fun fact there is the county across the river from us at the time was a dry county, so the population of the town would triple every Sunday for game days because you could go to bars and get alcohol, which was pretty fun. But it was interesting living with my dad working for 3M. I got to go see like the 3M Innovation Center, got to like meet one of the guys that worked on the Post-it Note project really early on, and seeing how 3M does innovation is really, really interesting company because they're one of the few companies that still has a very hardcore focus on just basic material science, which is really fun. And it's fun to see they come up with some new technology and then they go find 1,000 different applications of it.
So I want to go back to the origin of your team and how innovation actually kind of started to solidify. And so you said that there was an executive presentation and they were like, hey, we're going to add innovation as a cultural value. Did they also pitch to you the idea that there'll be a team behind this, a team of volunteers, or did that spring up from the both of you hearing it and saying, oh, we really actually have to action this somehow? Was there a plan of action before you both sort of reached out and started to put this together?
So no, that'd be a hard no. And I think originally it was even broken up into, let's say, another executive was looking at how to manage ideas that come in. On our side, it was almost like telling innovation stories. And through that, as we pulled Ben, myself, several other people who also volunteered at the time into it, then we realized that we had to merge things, right? And our goal was to actually drive innovation versus just reporting about it and telling stories. And it was a very long year to get to that first point of that. Ben, thoughts?
One of the things that we'd always struggled with was if you have a good idea, what do you do with it? Like if you want to go and you have a company that you work with and you say, hey, that would be a really good acquisition target for us. How do you do that? If you have a new product idea, how do you do that? If you have a way that, oh gosh, if we did X, Y, Z, we could save $1 million a year in expenses. There was really no place for any of that to go. Like we'd had idea boxes in the past and we'd run kind of cost savings campaigns and things like that. But the typical kind of life cycle for those things was there was a lot of attention up front. A lot of ideas got submitted. Maybe there was an Excel spreadsheet somewhere or a Word doc that had a bunch of ideas in it, but the ones that didn't happen right away would never happen because you never had a way to recall it. So, one of the things that was really important for Everett and I was how do we put structure around it? Like, how do we hold people's hand in a scalable way, right? We have 3,000 people. We can't have a team that has to go and drag people through the process each time. So we really were looking for a way to put more structure around innovation and have a kind of a well-tread path for people to get things done. Because that's the big thing. Like there was no lack of ideas, but there was a lot of issues with execution and people getting really bogged down and discouraged because, if you have something that you're doing that's sort of maybe extracurricular, not part of your main job, you can only work on it for so long, but until you're like, well, I'm just beating my head against the wall and there's other things that are more important. So innovation's going to be taking the backseat for a while until I get my own stuff together, right?
Also, I think the growth strategy for SS&C has always been to buy the next company. So we had, even as Advent in those days, several business units that all acted independent of each other. So they're only in name were they all connected, but they all had a completely independent operating structure and separate P&Ls. So getting people to actually talk to each other that's not in the same, like if you had an idea, let's say that was on the asset management side, well, I work in wealth, so no one's listening to me because they've already got their own backlogs, right? Because each of these now enterprise companies are really just grown-up startups, right? And they all are homegrown. They're just now part of a big enterprise. So as Ben was saying, the structure was not there to talk to each other or share ideas. And everyone's competing, to make sure they hit their revenue numbers. So that was also, it's like, where do you make the space for creativity and innovation when, we already have like our product backlogs are 2 to 3 years out.
Yeah, there's lots of threads to pull there. I mean, I've definitely heard the story of, management comes through and says, we're adding innovation as a core pillar or a core, part of our core values or a mission statement. And then people, the team says, well, what are we resourcing anything? Are we doing anything different with the budgets? And
What changes?
Yeah. Then the focus on operational targets, it really doesn't leave any room for, and people don't necessarily set up, objectives around, the strategic stuff and the transformation stuff.
Well, and something interesting for us, like our team early on, we made the decision that we didn't want this to be a typical an executive sparked and then the executive leaves and thus the initiative dies. So that was an early goal of ours, is to create something that would live beyond us. And in our situation, a year later, that executive left the company. So, we've been going on 4 years without any real executive leadership, so each one of us and people who come on and off the team are all there because they want to be.
So you guys raised your hand initially, kind of volunteer to kind of do something in this area. Have you been able to now allocate, a set portion of your time, or is it just kind of still flex time as a champion, or how is that organized currently?
So I can say for myself, I've been able to focus mainly on this over the last, probably the last year and a half, because the new sponsor is my boss. So I was able to roll into, at least from the focus, this is what I'm focusing on right now, so that's been kind of a really exciting change, but also it's a really challenging because of the other things we were talking about. Like, okay, teams have their own goals. Teams have, revenue targets, and I can say no one is stretched thinner than Ben. So he's engaged in 100 different things on any given day. We're constantly trying to build out the need for more dedicated resources.
For me, it's very much still kind of a side thing. The needs ebbs and flows though, right? Like there's sort of cycles. We have natural cycles with our hackathons that we do. I'm more of the technical person, so I do a lot of like the bright idea administration around it. So for me, I have a lot of work to do sort of leading up to an initiative, sort of have the technical support side of it as well. But yeah, it kind of ebbs and flows. And those weeks where we get really busy, just, sort of buckle up and go with it. But it's really interesting though, because we also get into all sorts of interesting things that are opportunities for us outside of innovation directly and outside of like our day jobs as well. So like I'm doing a lot right now. I'm building our AI governance framework for the global organization right now, because I got into that through the AI work and then kept on noticing, oh wow, no one's really talking about governance. Someone should probably be doing that, and ended up being able to get into that, which has been really interesting as well. So that's been it's still innovation related. It's definitely like building out the track and rails for us to be able to use AI, but it's very different from the day-to-day stuff that Everett's focused on with the platform and launching new missions for us.
The thing I want to tease out is just going back to what Everett said before we change subjects, is I think that there's this interesting phenomenon when innovation just feels like another to do, right? And you were touching on the fact that everyone is totally stretched thin and everyone has so much on their plate, and has revenue goals and needs to perform. And like, does innovation then just feel like one more thing that, folks are bothering me about? And so I wonder if you have thoughts about that, or even ways to make it not feel like a to-do and make it feel like actually something other than another thing on their checklist.
It's a great point. Like, one of the oft repeated objections we have when we're coming into a new team and we're saying, hey, let's build an innovative culture, let's launch a mission, let's figure out how do you improve your businesses. We don't have time to do that. Like, am I going to hire somebody to go do innovation for us? Because we don't have time to innovate. But oftentimes, like, my background's in consulting and continuous improvement. Oftentimes, when you actually step back and you look at the things that are taking your time, those are the things that you need to innovate the most on. So sometimes, the way I phrase it is, if your curtains are on fire all the time, you're throwing water on your curtains, but they keep catching on fire. Maybe you should look to see if there's like a wastebasket that's on fire that is catching your curtains on fire. So that idea of figure out, like, you need to make time for it, because otherwise you're never going to get out of that firefighting mode. So figuring out what is it that's contributing to us not having any time. The organization thinks we're appropriately resourced. Why don't we ever have time to do this is really, really important. And that's sometimes a really difficult thing for managers, especially small teams, where they're like, well, I have 8 things that we got to do every single month. I have 8 people to do those eight things. I can't fit another thing in there. But the military is big on saying go slow to go fast. Like, sometimes you got to have those slow periods where you work on your sort of technical and process debt and actually move things forward, because it's a virtuous cycle. Oftentimes, when you stop and you take a moment to breathe and you fix something, that frees a little bit of time up, and then you can fix another thing, and then another thing, and another thing. And before you know it, you've really expanded the amount of capacity your team has without having to actually hire anybody. And that's when you can really get to that sort of next level of maturity from an innovation standpoint, and really push through the wall of, we don't have time to innovate now. It's like, hell, innovation's our most important thing that we do, because we know how much return we get on that investment.
The term innovation is really weighted, because throughout our companies, innovation happens every day. Okay. They're just small little improvements, but people don't see innovation sometimes. It's like a perception, a cultural perception of, it's not my job. It's someone else's job to be innovative. And that was an early thing we were trying to address, is that anyone can participate. Like, we're not talking about leapfrog disruptive innovation every day. We're talking about, any type of improvement can be looked at as an innovation. And so trying to get people to see that, just because you work in, maybe you're answering phones, right? If you observe something, that could improve your day, it could improve your whole team's day, that could be seen, and we need to capture those ideas. Because that was the other problem, is a lot of people have them. Their ideas flying around all the time, but they don't know where to put it, who to talk to. When we first, one of the things we used to talk about early on, Ben, was like our IT organization, we have a variety of tools available to employees. Well, nobody knows what they are. Nobody knows where to look for them, And so there was those kind of growing pains that we were also trying to address with innovation. Because if you're in product or tech, more than likely you kind of see yourself in this role. But if you're in HR, if you're in finance, you don't have that mindset, even though you probably have ideas around how to solve problems within your space. So it's definitely getting people to see themselves in that different light, and that it's not someone else's job to do that.
So one question that I have, and I promise we'll get to hackathons, are you operating at multiple levels? I mean, you talked about acquisitions and talked about like new products, and there's kind of like continuous improvement, process improvement type stuff. Are you guys currently operating across that spectrum, or are you kind of zeroed in at one level versus another?
So my perspective is we fluctuate between levels based on, like Ben was saying, based on the need at the time. So think about running like an innovation challenge across multiple business units. Ben's working in AI, and I'll let you but how do you bring it up to this more conceptual and at the SS&C level? So now it's not just business units within your own leadership structure. It's business units, people you have no interaction with at all. So you need another group of people to do those introductions. It's at the team levels when you can get management. So kind of that internal improvement process, so how do we optimize a team or a piece of the business? If I think of our roles, Ben, I think we're basically salesmen, and we go around and reach out to leadership at a variety of different levels, looking for that work to then showcase what's possible.
Yeah, like a lot of what we do is really evangelizing the capabilities of the team and the platform. We've somewhat intentionally started small, where we're working within kind of the smaller teams. We took kind of a grassroots approach where we're working within those smaller teams. We're getting bigger and bigger and bigger, and now we run large hackathons for like the entire organization, right? But we're also looking to, okay, we've sort of got a model that works pretty well within the organization, within the culture, and within the kind of the guardrails that we have as a company. Now let's get that bigger. Let's go up to the corporate level and start trickling down elsewhere. Like all of the businesses are kind of like Russian nesting dolls of different companies. So you need to really be agile, because each of those teams has their own constraints. They have their own things that they're worried about. It's hard to look at innovation as a monolith with an organization the size of ours. Like our direct organizational unit, we've got around 4,000 people, but SS&C Technologies globally, we're just under, I think, 28,000 people now. So it's a very, very large organization, and we're in tons and tons of different businesses as well, whether it's investment management, health, insurance, call centers. Like the needs are varied, and super, super diverse, right? So trying to develop kind of a one size fits all model is a good plan for us. But we also need to be cognizant that we have to also kind of play to the home teams with these different organizations that we're working with.
I almost think like at some point we get to almost like a franchise model. Like there is, so where we're coming from a wealth background, let's say there's companies focused on insurance or healthcare, and we want to then franchise so that they can kind of, they can morph this into what they need for their people versus us trying to apply that one fits all, right?
That's great. I was going to ask that question of, if innovation's not a monolith, how should we think about it? And thinking about it as a franchise model, I think that makes a lot of sense.
Franchise is a good way to do that too, because even if you think about like McDonald's, right? McDonald's still has regional menus. Down here in the South in Jacksonville, you're always going to have sweet tea. McDonald's without sweet tea is unheard of. But you go up to Michigan or on the West Coast, you might not get sweet tea. So, but you still have those mechanisms, and you still have like this is the fryer that every McDonald's uses. This is the same supplier that every McDonald's uses. That stuff is common, but you can still sort of modify your offering a little bit based on the needs of who you're working with.
So I've got one more question before we jump into hackathon specifically, but where does your innovation fire come from? Like, where's that fire in the belly come from? Was it personal experience? Is it just impact on the world? Is it, and maybe you never thought about it, but I feel like there's always interesting stories in these areas.
I can't help it. I'm one of those people that, like, well, my first company is a good example of that. Like, I was sitting in a bar and I had my first Motorola Droid. Like, it was like the first Android phone out there, right? I'm sitting there waiting for the server to come. And I'm like, I'm sitting here with a computer more powerful than what brought us to the moon. Why do I have to wait for someone in meat space to come and transport their knowledge of the menu to me and then tell me what I can order, right? Like that, I can't help but look at things and see sort of potential. I'm also very ADHD, so I get bored quickly. So once I start getting bored, I get very creative and start thinking about all sorts of fun things to do that maybe are not part of my day job. But sometimes they have a lot of value, where it's like, hey, we could do something a little bit differently. I mean, that's me. Like, I just can't help it. Like, I have notebooks of ideas, and I'm always, I'm always talking with different people and just can't help but solve problems because I like solving problems. I'm one of those people that like I found the most optimal way to mow my lawn, and I do it the same way each time because it's the most optimal way to do it. But I don't know, Everett, what stokes your fire?
I can't stand solving the same problem twice. Okay. I am driven by more of the what if. How can we change this? How can we look at this differently? And then kind of similar, like curiosity drives me. I have, unfortunately, the attention span of a gnat. So I'm always, interested in what's next. Where it's AI for a lot of people, for me, it's spatial computing. It's exploring, 3D right now. But that's why, I spent a lot of years in consulting because you were kind of guaranteed every three to 6 months a new challenge to solve for. Versus enterprise, you're playing the year's game. And so that's really, I've been lucky that I've rarely worked a day in my life. So that's really what drives me is, I love bleeding edge. I love what's new. Maintenance is personal hell, for me. But yeah, that's, it's kind of like being, kind of like the way I grew up. Every two to 3 years, you get a little bit of an itch. It's time to move on to something new.
The box a little bit.
Exactly.
Now, neither of you mentioned this, but I think that there's an underlying thread, and I'm curious to see if you agree with this or if I'm totally off base. There's a frustration with inefficiency in each one of your stories. And it's not, you're very forward thinking, you're very positive. It's about advancement, it's about whatever. But I've sensed in both of your stories that there's like a deep frustration with inefficiency. Would you sign on to that?
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I chafe. Like I said, like I still to this day with the startup thing, like I'm like, God, someone's got to solve this. I can't stand when I know there's a better way to do it. And in a previous life before Advent, I worked with a lot of like accountants and accounts payable people, and you'd be surprised at just how much crazy stuff happens in enterprises. Like I worked with large, $100 billion organizations that part of their accounts payable process was there was a lady with a cart that would have paper invoices, and she would go around the office and hand out the invoices to the people who need to do it. And that stuff just feels absurd to me sometimes. Like if I know there's a better way to do it, like knowing and just accepting, oh, that's just how we do it, so this is not in my DNA, I can't do it.
I'm going to ask you about your lawn hack after the recording wraps up too.
But I agree, looking for more optimized ways, or just being in a meeting and like coming from consulting, if you're in the room, then you need to add value to it. Don't just invite me to a meeting to listen in, or let's do something. So, I think enterprise is incredibly challenging, because between the two of us, we're poster boys for ADHD. So, it's kind of funny. It runs, a lot of people, it runs through because, it's just that I don't want to do the same thing twice. If there's a better way, let's do it. And it's not falling in, what I used to tell people, especially designers, don't fall in love with your work because someone's going to make the next better widget, the next better bobble, right? This is as good as it is right now. But if we need to break it tomorrow, that's what we need to do. And that's hard for a lot of people. Definitely frustration drives a lot of conversations.
So we've been trying to build this synthesized community for a couple of years now, and just kind of allowing people in these roles to talk. And I think that's definitely a common thread of this kind of like corporate maverick. They're within the enterprise, but they're not quite comfortable in that, in that skin. They kind of want to, scratch the edges. They're committed to the organization and they want to make the organization work. But there's always this kind of like little mischievous itch there to constantly keep updating things.
You're making him sound like a caged raccoon, Matt.
Well, so I was going to jump off that a little bit. So
Speaking
something
of
I've written about, something that I've written about quite a lot with my customers is there's two different customers that I work with a lot, and it's rare to find the hybrids that are really effective, where you either have really innovative teams where everything is changing all the time. There's no process. It's chaotic. You're always going to be doing the best of everything, right? Because you're always innovating. But you might not be as efficient as you could be. The other side of the team, or the other side, is that there are, I call executing teams, where they are really good at reading the manual and doing those steps. But if you only ever have an innovative team, you're going to be chaos all the time. If you only ever have a executing team, who's going to be writing the manual for the next thing, right? You have to have people on your teams that can do both of those things, because otherwise it's going to be too chaotic, or you're never going to move forward. So finding the right balance to have the right team mix where you're going to have enough of each of those personalities around to actually be effective as an organization is really, really important. And it's one of those things, like everyone says, hey, I want to have an innovative team. I want to have an innovative team. But they forget that there's still a place for those people who are just really good at following the instructions and getting stuff done. Like, that is absolutely not a bad profile to have. You just need to have a balance between the caged raccoons and the people who are just following the manual.
All right, let's shift gears into hackathon here. So it sounds to me like you guys have been a part of this, kind of initiative to explicitly address innovation, and there's sort of a basket of activities going on, from suggestion boxes and challenges, and then hackathons are in the mix. So maybe you can talk about that journey and evolution. Were you always doing hackathons? Did it come on at some point? Was it top down? Was it bottoms up? How did the whole thing kind of get started?
Sure. So from the product side of the house, we can start there. Hackathons have been a part of our organization since I started in 2015, 16. Depending on the group, they're either purely, I'd call it just fun, just we've got a week and you can, as long as it's something that could possibly benefit the company, go do it, right? So very little structure, rigor around it. To groups who are actually having teams build code within a 2 to 3 day time frame, right? And so, going, with multiple product groups, there's multiple levels of maturity there, right? Some are really almost vaudeville acts that they're putting together skits, and that's part of the whole fun of it, versus some are really focused on putting something out that's going to get to clients, and there'll be a client that's even a judge. We had a lot of variety on the product side of the house. On the service side, Ben, I definitely know we had challenges. I'm not sure but I don't know the history of the service side.
Yeah, I mean, we never really did hackathons much on the services side of the business. That it was always seen very much as a product function or a product activity, so it wasn't something we typically did. And it's really hard. Like in the services side of the business, our consultants are all billed hourly, and everybody has utilization targets. So how do we say, okay, we're gonna let everybody spend a week having fun doing some initiative or whatever? Because that's not only do we have the direct people cost, but we have the opportunity cost of revenue. So it's a very difficult thing for us to do. So we've not historically done a lot there, but like Everett was saying, we had all of these sort of subcultures of how different teams thought about hackathons. And I think a lot of what we've been doing as a team is figuring out what's the best pieces of each of those things and bringing it in as sort of, this is how we do it as an organization. We're trying to get a better playbook. And we're trying to figure out, like, what is the absolute optimal way to do this? Because if you only focus on fun, it's a really, really expensive culture building activity, especially when you're talking about, there could be hundreds of software engineers, right? It's one of the most expensive roles that you're going to have at any company. And if it's only focused on fun, it's really expensive. But if you also only ever focus it on just doing technical debt and whatever, then that's also not really good, because you're still spending a bunch of money, but you're not getting any fun out of it. It's not like really going to be building your teams or getting anything done other than the technical debt. So again, like, finding that balance has been really interesting, and it's been really fun working over the last couple of years with some of our sub business units individually, and now we're bringing them together to do these much larger global hackathons, where not only do we have many different product teams represented, but we also have different offices and different global organizations, seeing people from India and Beijing and Stockholm and London and San Francisco and Jacksonville and Boston all competing around the same parameters is really, really interesting to see how each of those teams tackle those things, and just seeing the different cultures and just how they present their ideas is super, super fun. One of the big benefits we see from that, I think, is that there's some stuff that some teams take for granted, where they think, oh, everybody's just doing these kinds of things. But then when you present them to a big global audience, it's like, wow, actually only maybe 10% of the other teams are doing this. And beyond just the hackathon itself, there's things that we can learn, technical stacks we can learn, innovative ideas, approaches, infrastructures that people use that are different. So there's a lot of like knock-on effects to it as well, beyond just the output of the hackathon.
How often are those global hackathons happening?
So they're yearly, and that's got about 3 of them going now. What's also been interesting is, so historically, let's say we have one group that has really fun ideas, but nothing really comes out of it afterwards. But then we came across another group where they've embedded innovation time throughout their year. And then they also have a hackathon. So bringing some of those learnings to other teams also, as Ben, you were saying, is so an idea comes out of this one group. Well, now we can, leaders from, maybe another business unit have access to it now and say, oh, maybe we should have these guys talk to each other. So that way it's not, because really anything that came out of a hackathon only really got built if there was a product manager who saw it as a benefit to their line, right? So then that's how anything came out of hackathon. I was like, all right, well, I've slid it into my my backlog, but there was no real process for that. There was also no process for post-hackathon. Let's go review all the ideas. Let's grade them and see, from a more programmatic level, can we slide those into different teams to get them built out? So it's been incredibly beneficial, in my opinion, to the organization as a whole to be able to share that. And then as younger organizations come on, there's a group that will be starting up this fall. We're going to do a highlights reel to show what other teams have done to lessen the intimidation factor, because they've never held a hackathon before. We can introduce ideas like pitch day, so that the barrier of entry is simply the idea, no presentation, no PowerPoints, but just get up, open your mouth, and share it, and then see who's interested. It's funny because I don't think we started out thinking hackathons. We were really, looking at all the different apps that Bright Ideas has. How can we get to the lower teams? But the hackathons have been a really a boon for us, because it brings in such large groups, because
Really good engagement.
yes, we started off like when we did our initial kickoff, and we had a big like the company-wide town hall. Well, how do you create an engagement for everyone when they don't work on anything? A lot of similarities, and we came up with, and probably help from our support team at Bright Ideas, was stop the absurdity. We needed something that anybody could get involved with and engage, because so many of our products are very specific. They're niche audiences. So it's challenging.
So you guys seem uniquely positioned to talk about this kind of heterogeneous organization and like you said, people just doing things differently in different ways. And there's also a couple questions that we're bouncing around internally at Bright Idea, and I want to kind of get your thoughts on that. So one is, you actually mentioned a couple things, so I don't know if we'll get to all of them, but one of them is this question of like permissionless innovation. And like what we mean by that is, one view of hackathon is anyone can work on any project they want, right? And you don't have to get your manager's approval. You don't need to get a budget. You just kind of let people do what they want. And there's probably pros and cons to that. And then of course, if you're going to go do, formal presentations at the end, you can't necessarily have a 3 days worth of presentations. So I'm just curious if you've stumbled upon that, any insights from the field. We actually start to think about a pitch thing as almost a whole separate, animal, right? And some people are using the word idea-a-thon, where, it's not necessarily coding and stuff like that. So any color you can add on that? Do you leave it open-ended and let people work on anything they want? Do you kind of, down select or kind of restrict what people can actually code on or build on? Or, maybe you guys have seen both within your organization.
So I'd say we've got really both going on. So I would say you've got what we've started calling market challenges. So let's say the business has got a problem they want to solve, right? And that could, we just want to capture the idea. So then a group of people can review it. And it doesn't really need a presentation. It doesn't need it, We also started using innovation challenge versus hackathon when we're not looking for code, because I think that also is kind of that's a barrier, right? And so in preparation for any of our events, to be honest, months to weeks go into it, and what we have found, and Ben, jump in at any time to correct me, is the more we can get participation from the sponsoring organization, that helps us to define what the event's actually going to be.
Step one of that process, like meeting one, is what is it that you want to accomplish with this? Like, is it just for culture? Is it just for fun? Do you have a specific goal or a specific problem? And that really sets the rules to the road with how we're going to help them sort of package and construct their innovation challenge, whether it's going to be a hackathon, whether it's going to be something more like an idea box. The needs are diverse and various. So you really got to start from, I'm a big Franklin Covey fan, like start with the end in mind. If you don't do that, you're going to run into all sorts of issues down the road, because you're planning for one outcome, and then at some point someone says, well, hey, but we really, really want to have things that we can demo to clients out of this hackathon. It's like, well, crap, we've now forgotten to do all of the infrastructure that we would want to have to do that. There's all sorts of parameters and guidelines that you need to give the teams to accomplish that goal. So we really drill that in first, is like, what do you want to get out of this? And then we can figure it out. Because a lot of times people think they know what they want, and they don't necessarily know it. Because like once we do a lot of like 5 whys where someone says, oh, I want to accomplish X, and we say, why do you want to accomplish that? And when you do that a couple of times, it's like, well, actually, I don't know why I wanted to do that. That was just sort of what was in my head. So a lot of value of what we bring to the table as part of the innovation team is not only the experience and knowing what does and doesn't work, but also that consultative mindset of really getting to the root of what people want to get out of what they're doing. Because again, like, it's an investment. Like I did the paper math at some point for one of our big global hackathons. It's like we invested something to the tune of like, I don't know, $4 or $5 million in this hackathon. We couldn't go out without a bunch of approvals to buy a $4 million piece of equipment or something. Like, we should have a little bit more thought put into something like a hackathon as well.
And are the teams on the smaller side, are the teams coming to you? Are you going to them? How are you promoting that you even exist and they're aware of you? And
we're a promotion machine.
Talk to us about that. What are the tactics there?
So between Ben and myself, we basically cover leadership from across product and service, right? So, there's a lot of outreach. There's been, smaller projects where we can kind of prove our value. And we're now at a point where, these are yearly events. So, we even have the organization themselves reaching out, so like, for example, I have a hackathon will happen in October, but we've already had our second meeting for planning for that, right? And then going back to, like, the sponsors are incredibly important for what does the executive want to get out of this, but it's actually the next level team that does everything else. And then through that, you might even want to pivot or change the actual outcome, right? Because now you're getting kind of that sub leadership or the really cultural champions that, any leader is going to want to keep happy and hear them out. And then also it gives those people an opportunity to talk with leadership that they may not get on a regular basis. So being part of building a hackathon kind of team is a really great career opportunity, in my opinion, because you'll get to talk to leadership and, as well as managers across different departments, that, may come in handy one day when you're looking for that next opportunity.
I would say like it was much more difficult at first, right? Like we had a lot of headwinds to fight against when we first launched the initiative, because people said, well, we've done this before and it didn't go anywhere. We invested, last time this happened, I invested a bunch of time and didn't really see anything out of it. This is only going to last a year, so I'm not, really interested in helping it. Because of that, we had to go through, we did a lot of road shows where we would talk one-on-one with the leaders of different businesses and teams, talk about what are the things that concern them. We really had to look at the innovation team like its own service model, its own business almost, figuring out what do our customers want? How do we service them with the resources we have? Because we do have, very tight resources and constraints, right? So that was step one for us in figuring out exactly what is the market need that we need to provide. And then, like Everett said, like now that we've sort of built up our brand a little bit, it's been much, much easier. Now we have more people coming to us proactively with ideas on events that they want to run. There's, people will say, hey, I want to make sure we're on the calendar. We want to do something in October. Let's get started now. So we have plenty of time to figure it out. They know that they have a good partner in our team and that we sort of know what we're talking about in terms of innovation and that we can add value. When we first started, we had to kind of not necessarily beg, but we had to sort of insert ourselves a little bit and say like, hey, you're going to run your initiative through the platform. We're going to help you do it. We're going to make it super, super easy for you. So it's not going to be an additive process to what you guys are normally do. But once people saw the value of the platform and how well it worked and how much value they got out of the interaction with the team, things became much, much easier from there. And now we're looking at, okay, how do we expand this? Because we're rate limited. We have more demand right now than we can satisfy internally. And that's where we're trying to figure out, okay, how do we get more efficient? How do we get more people involved in this and really get it out there? And as far as promotion goes, like work with your executives. If you have quarterly all staffs, the innovation team should be part of those all staffs planning. Like there should be presentations, as a team. Everett said this earlier, but we spent a lot of time really intentionally elevating voices that people didn't typically hear from, which was a really good opportunity. One of the people that was really early on with our team was an intern. Like she was an intern in product management, and she, within the first year of working for the company, was doing presentations for the entire global organization. And that was a really cool opportunity for her. And she's done super, super well ever since then. And, been great opportunities for Everett and I as well. But like getting in front of people, making sure people like see who's responsible for this and always just being available is really, really important to us early on.
Yeah, something that I'm very proud of from the get-go is so often in our all hands, all you see is executives. Those are the voices. So there's 5-6 people, you see them all the time. Whenever we present for innovation, the whole team speaks. So whether you're from product, service, new, if you're volunteering, we're going to get you in front of the camera. We're going to give you a voice, and hopefully that you being there, your voice is going to resonate with someone who is not in the executive level of their career. And so that's been something I love about our group is there's no heroes. Everyone brings something to it, and we make sure that everybody gets in front. So, for example, that same intern is more than capable of going to her boss's boss and presenting when one of us isn't available. And I love that.
That's awesome. I have a kind of broad question. So outside of seeing this headwind kind of flip into a tailwind, right? And now you have more demand for hackathons and innovation and work than outside of that. What have you seen about the business or the culture change in the last few years since you've been in this role?
We've been in nothing but change for the last 4 years. From new organizations naming to changing how we do business in more of a market focus versus an individual business unit. So it's really been kind of a crazy time because no one's on stable ground. And then you throw, the market into that mix as well. And, you're dealing with a lot of change, some good, some scary. That change has also helped to break down some more traditional silos and getting people and groups to, more organically engage with each other. And I think that's something we've, I like to think that's something we've helped a lot with.
Yeah, I would say that cross-pollination is probably one of the biggest changes that we've seen, especially like within our product teams. Like when you're a product team, you don't really have necessarily much in common with somebody working from another product, right? Your technical stack might be different. Your management stack is different. Even your market and your customers might be very different. So there's not very many natural opportunities to engage with them. And I feel like one of the biggest things that I've seen is we're building relationships through innovation where people have worked on a team with someone now from a completely separate product team, right? Like one of the challenges we did, that the teams got extra points if they were working across business units and across product teams, which has been a really great way to encourage people to sort of get out of their comfort zone and meet people that, work in another organization. And every time we see different parts of our company interacting with each other, good things come from that. Like there's never been a bad thing that has come out of two teams talking to each other that have never talked before, because there's always things that they can learn. There's always improvements that can be made. And I think that's been the biggest thing, is like that happens way more naturally now than it ever has before.
For example, Ben and I would have, other than the in our break room, have any reason to engage with each other. We're on very different businesses, very different jobs. So a lot of good opportunity.
Yeah, I think hackathons and innovation broadly it's this kind of unique space where the rules of the road are kind of let down for a day or two. Like with a hackathon, you can get in front of a senior executive, you can work on stuff without having to ask for permission, and you can the intern can be the superstar, and that's okay. It's kind of part of the process. So it's cool you guys have been able to take advantage of that.
It's also, judging is really kind of an interesting part of hackathons as well, because when you bring in sales and support crew leaders to be judges, they're looking at it differently, right? Superlatives are a big deal for us, so here's a list of categories that we've made up. Here's most popular, here's the coolest thing. And people get really excited about that. Voting is fun and a nightmare, right? Because like chip voting, people love gambling. They're all about it. But it's great when you can pull those different leaders in, and then, they can also bring their perspectives, and you get them talking, because if they see one of their people working really well with someone from, other side of the business, well, again, there's opportunities you just haven't, you haven't seen yet.
Yeah, that's one of the hardest things of growing beyond a startup is, there's this moment early on where sales is in the same room as product, and product overhears the salesperson on the call, and salespeople can look at what the product is doing. And the minute they go into just a separate room, it could be just right next door, but the minute there's that separation, there's a gap occurs. And then as a product person, there's nothing worse than you're bringing this thing you're all excited about, and the salesperson goes, what about this, or what, and you're just like, oh man, we totally missed. We should have brought someone in earlier. Well, I feel like there's a million things we could talk about, and we've used up most of our time. I'd love to maybe do another show or session at some point and talk about idea backlogs for different departments and stuff like that, because that's another topic I'm interested.
Yeah, no, we appreciate the time. This is great.
I'm curious if you guys, and we can take a couple more questions if there are them, but one thing I'd love to get on the record on is, if you were kind of speaking to a younger version of yourself, or another professional who's doing their first big hackathon, high visibility, what should they be watching out for? What's the thing they need to do? They need to nail to make sure this thing comes off and is as good as it can
Besides caffeine for the overnight shift.
Yeah. For me, it's go with your gut. I don't care how the crazier the better. This is an opportunity to test boundaries, and it's safe. Okay. So, being experimental, reach out to people you don't normally get to work with, really leverage this opportunity, because teams are so overwhelmed and have so much on their plates that even in the best cultural setups, silos just happen. It is just, you talk to, even on an open floor plan, it is very common for you to talk to the person next to you and behind you and nobody else. So I think these are great opportunities to have fun, try new things out, but be brave.
I'd echo everything that Everett said, but I'd also say don't be afraid of constraints. Like a lot of times people think innovation, you want it to be all blue sky and whatnot, but sometimes constraints can be really good things, because if you come up with the solution to some problem that the business has, but it's in some diametrically opposed manner that isn't going to work, then you've just wasted your time, and you're going to get discouraged for no reason. Because if you knew what the guardrails were up front, you could have adapted your idea to the guardrails, right? So don't be afraid of putting some constraints on it. Make them reasonable and broad enough that people can still have a lot of fun and be creative. But make sure that people understand, like, hey, we do want these outputs to be commercialized at some point, and that means maybe we don't get to use whatever stack we want to, because we don't want to have to pay, Oracle a bunch of money to license Java, because we don't do that today, right? Don't be afraid of constraints. And then making sure that leadership is incredibly engaged is important. Make them judges, make them show up to the initial calls. They don't got to be on all the calls, but at least have the checkpoints in, make sure that you're engaging them, because if they don't care about what you're doing, you're not going to meet their needs, and you might not have support to do the next one. The being able to have the resources and time to do a hackathon, that's a resource. You need to be a really good steward to the resource. You need to make sure that the sponsors that you're working with from the business are going to get the value that they need. So that way you can do it over and over and over again. Because the worst thing that you can do is get a whole bunch of resources, not engage the people who need to care about it, and then flub it, and then never get those things again.
Yeah, it's interesting when you talk about constraints. Coming from an agency background, we always have a brief. And so the reason creative agencies can be successful is because there's so many constraints put on that particular project and the ideas. We don't do that enough in-house. It really is beneficial to creativity, to innovation. And then to your point on, if the leadership doesn't seem invested, why nobody else is going to be. So, they need to be the cheerleader. They need to be the, promoting it, sharing it out, walking down the hallways and say, hey, I can't wait to see what you're going to do this year. Everyone needs that more.
So I'm gonna ask a meta question here, but when I'm sitting here talking to you guys, it sounds like there's 100 things we haven't gotten to, and so what's the question we should have asked? What's the I don't know, maybe it's about incentives, maybe it's about innovation more broadly, maybe it's about AI. What did we miss in our inadequate moderation here?
Well, I think this has been a pleasure, but I guess really it's the challenge, the frustration of doing this. It's kind of of lifting this up without traditional support within an organization. And
people don't understand that when they get into it, or what's the peel that onion for them?
Innovation is a practice of managing without authority. We can't tell anybody to do anything, and you absolutely, no matter how powerful of a CEO, you can't point at someone and say, you need to go be innovative today. It doesn't work. You got to start with the mindset, and you got to give people the tools.
So what I would add there is, if a hackathon's a sprint, the program's a marathon, and you've got to pace yourself, because I can say for our past 4 years, there have been great years. There have been years where I don't know if I got anything left in me. You work in an enterprise, which is a marathon in itself. It takes like good team partners. We're there to lift each other back up. We're there to kind of say, hey, yeah, this is something we really want to do. This is what we believe in. Because, yeah, there can be a lot of ups and downs on this journey.
I'll jump off that and say that managing your own expectations is really difficult. Like when we first started this journey, we had 1,000 things that we wanted to do and resources to do none of them. And it's easy to run your first initiative and almost get discouraged. Like on one hand, cool, we got to do it. Like a lot of people were engaged, but like what happened from it? Like what do we have to show for this? Like just the act of doing it has a lot of value. You don't want to be performative, but like just doing things can make things better within an organization. You don't have to change the world to have an impact. So managing that so you don't get discouraged is really, really important. And you're not going to naturally institutionalize innovation within an organization. Like it takes effort and it takes buy-in from your leadership, and it takes putting your money where your mouth is to make it work. It is a very unnatural thing to make an organization innovative. So you need to do it with intention, and you need to really look at things from an eye of like, okay, if we want this to always happen, what are the mechanisms and tools and procedures we can put in place to make sure it always happens? So it's institutionalized, not just living or dying on the shoulders of, these gregarious dudes in Jacksonville.
I have a funny observation. I feel like both of you agreed that like you have a dislike of inefficiency, but it sounds like putting together an innovation program inside of a company and even running initiatives can be incredibly inefficient. So it's almost like innovation, when it works, helps solve inefficiencies, but the process of innovation is incredibly inefficient.
Well, and organizational change is incredibly inefficient.
And you need that for innovation, right?
You do.
And there's no playbooks. I mean, I think they're going to where they're most needed, right? They're going to the greatest inefficiency, right? And they're trying to define those playbooks, for the next generation.
Well, and for people who are on this path like we are, setting expectations, because I can, as I know, Ben, over the last couple of years, we're used to being successful in what we do. This is a whole different level of how do you measure success. And so having the right expectations, going to our leaders and, kind of with that validating, okay, are we sane? Because it doesn't feel like we're moving that needle, even if we are, and our leadership will be like, oh yeah, no, this is great. But it's a whole different speed than we're used to, and but it also has a much larger impact if in the end.
All right. Well, I think we're a little bit over our time block, so I want to thank both of you guys for sharing your time, sharing your wisdom, sharing your insights with this Synthesize community. And I think people are definitely going to be better off with it. So thank you again, and I'm sure we'll be in touch shortly.
Yeah, no, pleasure. Thank you, guys.
Thank you for listening to the Synthesize Pod. For more resources on how to bring innovation to the forefront of your organization, sign up for our newsletter at brightidea.com. That's BRIGHTIDEA.com. And don't forget to subscribe so you never miss an episode.